I I was talking to my dad, who's in like business and sales and such earlier today, and historically he's thought that like the path you and I are on, all farmers are on, is an educational journey,
Yeah.
educating the consumer and such. And I think that's really true. And I also think that on top of that, we have this educational journey that we need to embark on, educating consumers, like the people that really actually want good food, and they're already on the bus, and they already are trying to purchase and source that food locally or what have you. Like there's an re-educational journey there. In like, I was talking to one guy in North Carolina, and one of the biggest like meat aggregators in North Carolina retails like, regenerative foods or whatever. And I just learned that one of their suppliers has been giving them call cows that have been given antibiotics recently, and they're selling it as antibiotic free meat. and and it's everywhere though. Like that anomaly is, it's everywhere. And so like there's an educational journey that most consumers have to go on, understanding what really actually good food is.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's like the people retailing good, wholesome, local foods. It's not all equal. Like like good, nourishing, sustainable, local, regenerative foods, whatever term you want to use.
Yeah.
It's not all with the best intentions in mind.
No. No.
But
Yeah.
it was just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's we all, we talked about this last time. It's, the quality of and the idea of scale. That's what it comes down to. It's, and I just actually had this conversation with a customer of ours that, there's another company in the area called, Walden Local, but I've seen them like where their advertisement space is, and just by looking at how they're advertising, I can tell that there is really no concrete direct relationship with many of their producers. Just from what I know from doing this for 8 years and create, like, I mean, and if they do, I don't know the scale of those farms, and then the scale of those farms, starts to impact the quality and the quality of what they're offering. So she reached out and just said, I thought that they had better quality, and I would go to Bone In because you guys were a small startup operation for like my odds and ends, and I think I'm going to cancel with them because the quality of your product and the quality of your services is hands down better than theirs. And I'm like, that's what you get when you actually like stay in your place and realize that you can't scale something that isn't scalable. And I mean that with the, in what our mindset today is regarding scale. We have this mindset, that we're supposed to be making millions of dollars in a couple years because we had one great idea. Like, people have had those ideas before. It's now, how do you implement them? How do you use the infrastructure and the technology to implement those ideas successfully and stick to your roots, stick to what you're doing? And it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy. So I don't blame these companies for it, but at the end of the day, they're perpetuating the same problems that got us here in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. So much of this space is just industrial agriculture rebranded as something less detrimental to society, to ecology, to something.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Like I think there's a perfect place for cheaper food. I understand that. There's probably a lot that could be said down that pathway, but like the organizations that Commons here in the Mid-Atlantic that we continually see, and our customers or our potential customers, mouths or brains or different, grocery shelves that we wish looked a little bit different. Like there's a place for them. Like I understand that not all companies have to be Bone In, right? Not all companies have to be Commons, but you sure as hell better understand in your marketing that if you're selling antibiotic infused cattle, that it's not antibiotic free beef. Or, if it's coming from local regenerative farms, that it's actually a local regenerative farm, right? Like the marketing has to start taking into account actuality, not what we want it to be. And I think it's how these organizations were developed I think also like their own organizational journey, if you will, I think also pertains to a lot of their ailments. Like I know there's one organization in Northern Virginia that has this huge demand. They've really good at business. They have a huge demand, millions and millions and millions in yearly revenue. But in order to supply local meats and local produce for that to satisfy that demand, they have to get it from large farms, right? And so they created the demand, and then they built a supply chain to meet that demand.
Yep.
Whereas with organizations like Commons and Bone In, to me, as I understand it, right, we see a need, right, that local people are hungry, and local farmers producing really good local foods have the ability to, heal their local community's need for nourishment. And then there's just a bridge that's connected, right? It's not like you went out, got a 10,000 or 100,000 or $10 million purchase order from Applegate, right?
Yeah.
That's buying in 100,000 pounds of ground beef a month. And you were like, okay, now how can we efficiently fulfill this purchase order?
Yeah, that's
right. Like we've obviously built our organizations from the opposite perspective,
Yeah.
from the humans and the local, perspective first, and expanded it from there. And I think that speaks wonders. Like, we always say at Commons, like when I'm trying to, because I'm not a salesman, I'm like the worst at selling anything. But like, I always say, like, if you don't buy from me, that's fine. But whoever you do buy from, ask a couple key questions.
Yeah.
Number one, who do they buy from? Number two, is that all they buy from? Like there's an organization, one of them I've previously mentioned. Well, let's say they retail 20 cows a week or whatever, 20 cows a month. I have no idea. They're pretty at scale. So I would imagine it's more like 20 cows a week. And I would bet 19 of those cows come from local grain-fed, grain-finished cattle feedlots. But one of them comes from a local regenerative farm, right? So like if you're supporting that organization because they're a regenerative organization retailing local regenerative meats, understand that 95% of the meats that they peddle are not what you think they're peddling.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's one of the key questions in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do they exist to help, or do they exist to fulfill purchase orders, and they happen to maybe help a little bit?
I think like if they're helping a little bit, that gives them enough clout to say, oh, well, fuck everything else then. And they probably don't say it like that. They probably convince themselves, because money talks, that, oh, this is all, we have to scale this slowly. We have to still feed people. Like there's a million different reasons they can come up with as to why cheating is a necessity for them. And it's all positive towards this global change or community change, as you and I would like to put it, because I'm not trying to feed the world. You're not trying to feed the world, but
Right.
A lot of these companies are. And, we're just trying to make small change. And we know that in order to make that change, you could only do it the way that you and I have started Common Provisions and Bone In, is we have to first source, find the sources, then create the demand for those sources. And that requires ample amounts of education as to why we're different than these other businesses. And it's like, if you can't tell me everything about that beef or everything about that poultry or pork, then there's a kink in your chain that most people are just going to, smother with a white lie because they have a better service or a better idea in place to move the needle forward. I've been in that predicament. I've been there where it's just like, but you have to tell me where you're getting, like, I'm working with a farmer who does pasture-raised, beef, pasture-raised poultry. And it's like, well, I only see cows and pork here. So where's your chicken coming from? And it's like, oh, well, he raises, pastured poultry. And it's like, but I haven't seen it. So is it just to kind of fill your market and push the needle? And even if, you are doing things right, like, how am I, if I can't meet your farmer, if I can't meet the farmer I'm working with's farmer, then there's a kink in the chain, and it sucks because, you're serving that farmer. So you're like, I have good intentions, but at the end of the day, I actually lose sleep over that stuff because it's, don't know. It's to me, it's very important to not have those kinks. Otherwise, to me, it's not sustainable. We're producing more than there's demand for, and that comes with food waste. And I refuse to waste food. We've done this for 8 years and haven't wasted a pound of food. Everything is found a home. So that's one thing my entire team is very proud of. But let me ask you. So I know we briefed about it. So you have a farm right now. What's the size of your farm?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we run. It's a little under 400 acres.
400 acres. And you're doing all livestock or mostly beef?
All livestock. Historically, poultry, pigs, goats, lamb, goat milk, lamb, and beef.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right now, it's primarily beef and lamb with a goat dairy.
Cool. And vegetables too, or no?
For home use.
For home use. Cool.
Yeah. For home use.
So we're here to talk about grass-fed beef and the marketing labels. So we don't go into poultry and pork.
Yeah.
We'll stick to the beef for this one.
Yeah.
So are you breeding cattle on your farm?
We are. Yep.
Okay. And then, so those cattle's being bred. They're feeding on grass. 400 acres of pasture. How many cattle do you have on 400 acres?
That's a good question. I bet we're 150 head, maybe, give or take.
Yeah, that's great. Because what did they say? You need about 2 acres, more or less, per animal to have a regular source coming direct from the farm between hay and grass.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of our land was historically forested or neglected pasture. And so, in some pastures we're getting, a cow-calf pair an acre. Some pastures we're getting, one cow-calf pair every 5 acres. It just depends on what the pasture looks like.
Yeah.
What its state is. It's so interesting. I don't know how you say this. Like, I think there's a lot of people wanting to purchase better food. And it's understandable, the angst and anxiety or depression or overwhelmedness that these consumers feel when they start trying to understand what does that better food look like. Because even a farmer, right, you get 10 regenerative farmers in a room and very few of them can actually determine what is the exact way, a bovine wants to be raised in a pasture or diversified meadowland or developing silvopasture. Or I know people who finish beef on acorns in the woods, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes no rational sense according to the USDA or the National Resource and Conservation Service. Or, take any grazing conference, and finished cattle on acorns makes very little sense. And so there's very little agreement. But I'll tell you what, right? You mentioned that you wanted to talk about this, and I looked up the American Grass-Fed Association, who really, for everybody else's sake, AGA, American Grass-Fed Association, they really dictate the grass-fed label. Like they're like the USDA on organic, right? Organic is owned as a term by the USDA, American Grass-Fed Association. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's pretty darn close. They really, quote unquote, own the grass-fed label, or they desire to own it, or to really define what it is.
Even though organizations are out of scale.
Yeah, well, exactly. So I looked this up. This is the ruminant, so beef, goat, lamb. I'm sure there's more, but that would be like the top produced ruminants for meat for the consumer. This is their approved ruminant grass-fed supplements. So you're allowed to give this to a 100% grass-fed and finished cow. Okay, all of these ingredients, and maybe you know this, Rod. Maybe you don't. Okay, I'm just going to read the list. This is hilarious. So again, just to be very clear, I can market my beef coming off of my land, 400 acres of rolling and diversified hills and forests, as 100% grass-fed and finished, and I can still feed those cows these ingredients. And I'll read them to you. Peanut hulls.
Okay.
Peanut meal. Rice hulls or rice hull pellets. rice bran, corn cobs, like not,
Silage.
don't you dare put the corn on the cob, but the cob is fine.
Yeah.
Oat hulls, oat silage, corn silage, soy hulls, soybean meal, flaxseed meal, safflower seed meal, sunflower seed meal, wheat bran, corn meal, and canola seed and canola meal, linseed meal. I can continue on. Like, you can't get through this list without realizing
Well, our
that
government
in
has so much
my
surplus fucking grain, so they got to put it somewhere. Yeah.
right, and you tell me, like, you as the consumer, like you and I are both in our positions. We've been here for a long time. Bone In is a pretty well developed company, and I've been farming for half of my life now, and like but for a moment, lift ourselves out of that space. You and I become a consumer once again, and think about this. Do you and I actually think, like, walk to a grocery store, walk to a farmer's market, walk into Bone In's online marketplace, whatever it is, you see you see grass fed and finished, burger, ground burger, or steak, sirloins, fillets, roasts, bottom rounds, top rounds, whatever they are, just any one of them. Do you think corn, soy, flax, canola,
No.
oats, wheat? Do you think? I thought grass.
Yeah.
I thought when I said grass, I meant like grass, that which grows in a pasture inevitably as the sun shines,
Yeah.
right? Grass.
Yeah.
Herbaceous perennials growing. And my point is, like,
And I bet you oats was squeezed in there recently because, people are starting to fall away from corn and soy, but they
yeah.
like oats. There's a demand for oat milk over regular
I was
milk.
about to say oat milk's going to save the
Right?
world.
Oat milk's going to save the world, so let's shift people in that direction. Hey, we'll feed it to the cows too, in case we grow too much. Like our cows, that 100% grass-fed cow to me sounds like a composting machine. That's what it sounds like. So,
which is crazy. Your and I's point is completely identical, and it is. I don't want to say traceability as if what you and I are selling are products that have a supply chain that is traceable as if it's some like modern mechanistic thing. But in my opinion, right, like, if you can't go see the cows, if that is not an option given to you, stop. Stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's organizations all over the country, consumer packaged good organizations, CPG they're called, and like Force of Nature is one of them. They're from Austin, Texas. And they get a grand majority of their food from organizations, not organizations that happen to own land and produce food. We can call that a farm if you like. But they don't offer tours, right? Like, one of them is Ted Turner's 2 Million Acre Ranch or whatever. Like, Ted ain't giving you a tour on a Saturday afternoon to go look at his herd, right? Like, this is a joke. Come on, this is laughable.
Yeah, it is.
This is laughable, and in that way, it's not traceable. I get it, but there's no way for it to be scaled back to a very human sense.
Yeah, that's
right. Where like one human can go to another human's farm, look at the cows, right? Like, you can make that judgment. You don't have to know what a body score on a cow is. You don't need to know the difference between what makes a boy cow different from a girl cow other than the genitals, but how do we tell what, like, you don't need to know anything, right? Because we give tours all the time. We have horned cows, and everybody, the first thing they always say is like, oh, you have a lot of boys. And I say, well, no, girl cows can have horns too. Like, I don't need you to not understand that. I don't need you to understand that. You just, is this what they ate their whole life? No, I got soy in the barn that I feed them, right? Like, that's very easy to see. And not that everybody has to go out to the farmers, but if the meat and the food coming out of these systems isn't capable of providing that connection, right, between the consumer and the producer of that food, to me, that is a weighing mechanism to quickly weigh that this methodology of packaging and selling food just isn't working. It can't work.
It can't work.
Not if we're charging more for it. Like, there's so many ways to look at this. Like, my dad recently, I'll stop rambling after this, but like, my dad recently had a stroke, and he was in the hospital, and blah blah blah, and the doctor has a very strong opinion on how he should be living his life different with decreased stress and a different diet and such. And now imagine, right, that my dad, who's lying in a hospital bed telling, hey, you almost died, and if you don't change your lifestyle, you're going to die, you need to eat differently. He then goes to a CPG company out of Austin, Texas, and starts buying beef that he thinks, right, is properly balanced between omega-3s and omega-6s and linoleic acid and all these other things that you and I care about and love about.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, bone broth is really good, right? So I buy a lot of bones, and he's making bone broth and stocks out of beef that happens to not actually be good beef, right? And he doesn't get better. He spends buku bucks on it because it's twice as expensive as Walmart, but it's actually not that much better than Walmart,
Yeah.
right? And he still dies of another stroke. Like this is a serious conversation.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think it's very it's very important to be considering that people are spending a lot of money to heal themselves because we're told food is medicine now.
Yeah.
And like it's a catchword and it's true.
Yeah.
But like good food is good medicine and bad food is bad medicine.
Yeah.
Right. And everything is being marketed as regenerative and nutrient dense. I mean, if you grow food outside, you are growing regenerative, nutrient dense food. Like that's the mantra of today.
Yeah.
And that needs to be blown up and then burned, in my opinion.
Yeah, because it's the workload between the one actually doing it the way it's supposed to be done versus the one that's just doing it with a label is there's no comparison. Absolutely no comparison. Following suit, following that grass-fed label. I mean, I can't tell you the farm that we work on with Lima Family Farms and John Lima. He says it all the time. He goes, I am very confident in saying that most farmers that say they're grass-fed beef are not raising their animals solely on grass. And he doesn't go into details about it other than what you and I are talking about now. He won't even dive into that. He's even offered a lot of conventional growers to let his cows come out when they grow a cover crop and feed on those cover crops instead of burning them to the ground. And they won't even take him up on it, because it's just too much work. It's like, it's not part of their system, and he's just like, well, the cows are going to come out and graze your property and they're going to, leave their inputs and fertilize your soil and hopefully make your next round of crop even healthier. So he's always trying to implement the old system into this new system by offering his assistance, by offering his help, some sort of help. And when I hear from his mouth that most grass-fed beef is not being fed 100% grass, and then I go to his property and his cows are always feeding on grass. He grows over 250 varieties of grass. It's like, yeah, I see his cows. Like I know these are 100% grass fed. And then so that's the whole marketing conundrum that we're in right now. Is we have grass fed beef, we have 100% grass fed beef, we have grass fed, grass finished beef. Organic grass fed beef. We have pasture raised beef. This is where you're saying, where people who are spending all this money to get the healthiest, most nutrient dense foods into their bodies to heal are losing their minds. I was one of them. That's the reason I started this whole business. I was reading labels and I'm like, I have no idea where this is coming from. I have no idea the production behind this. You tell somebody that they're eating grass-fed bone broth, and that cow isn't feeding on grass, it's eating something that's toxic, and that's ending up in its marrow.
Right.
I mean, come on. Like that is like the heart of every living organism, is the cellular reproduction that's happening in the core of that bone. And you're going to simmer that for a long time, bringing out everything in that piece of animal and expect it to be nourishing you. Will you get nourishing benefits from it? Yeah, but not nowhere near where if you actually could tell me what that animal was eating from the entirety of its birth to its death. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if this is an apt analogy, but like the thought that came to me immediately is like when I plug my phone into charge, like I expect it to charge and I expect it to charge fully given the time. Like I would be so angry. Obviously less angry than if I was putting, pesticide infused corn cobs into a cow and then selling it as chemical free and then sucking on its marrow. Like that's obviously a different degree of disgust. But like imagine buying a phone charger for twice what every phone charger is worth and it only charges your phone 10%. Like, yeah, it provides a charge. Like, yeah, bone broth is going to be nourishing no matter, the system it comes out of, right? But like you spent so much money and dedication to do what? Well, one, to be lied to. Like, let's just totally accept that. You were lied to. You were played. But in addition to that, like, it's now what? Right? Like you're sucking in the marrow of an animal that was born and raised in an environment that was chemically toxic.
Yeah.
Right? Emotionally toxic. Yeah. Like, that's one thing that we push a lot down here. There's a lot of farmers that go to the sale barn, pick up an 18-month-old steer, put it in their pasture for a couple of years, and retail it as grass-fed and finished beef. That animal has lived in an emotionally toxic, let alone physically and ecologically toxic environment for 18 months.
Yeah.
4 months on your pasture isn't doing anything to that animal. Like, thank God it died in a pasture, or at least died with 4 months, the last 4 months of its life in a pasture.
And I mean, I could speak from personal experience because obviously, we have very complex immune systems as a human, and
right.
I was eating crap for 30 years. That's why I got sick. I was at a high inflammatory state from a modern lifestyle, eating food that was just easily available, that was just there, taking pharmaceuticals whenever I didn't feel well, instead of just naturally letting my body combat it. And now I've been eating totally clean for the last 10 years. Now, do I feel great? Hell yeah. I mean, I feel better now at 40 than I did throughout my 20s. My skin is improving. My hair is improving. Like, there's certain elements on me that are improving. And even they haven't fully changed. Like, they haven't gotten better, 100%, which means my body is still regenerating. It's still working towards, what's the word? Optimal health. So, what's a cow that's being fed things it can't digest for the first, 16 months of its life to then be fed what it's supposed to be eating the last 3 or 4 months of its life? It's not there. Right. Everything that was bad that's in it is still making its way out. So it's the only way is like 100% from start to finish, where there's someone in, which is the way it used to be done. We know that was the way it used to be done before industrialization. Before industrialization then took over the agricultural evolution and took this heavy machinery and applied it to fields and realized that we can mass produce commodity foods for people. That was when everything just started to go downhill, and in the government's favor, in these big organizations' favor, because now they controlled our food system. So it's like, if people don't want to buy or understand fully what grass-fed beef is, or get really, really involved, then you're just supporting the same efforts that have already put us in this place in the first place. So
right. Yeah, and that speaks also, I think, like thinking about how pre-industrial agriculture's poisoning of our food system. Like we also ate a grand diversity of foods, and I don't just mean beef and lamb and goat and venison, or carrots and tomatoes and cucumbers and bean, like whatever. I also mean like a wide variety of those species.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, like when Commons was built,
cute.
What's up, little man? When Commons was built, it's so interesting.
It's a squishy. It's a squishy.
Oh, you're good. I'll just wait for a second.
What?
We'll clip this part.
Yeah, you're good.
You need help?
What? I'm coming.
He's coming, Mom. I'm just taking his shoes off.
we'll, we'll clip that. I was just saying, like when Commons was built, tons of organizations started like learning about it because all of our producers, due to a lot of money that we've raised, are EOV verified or ecological outcome verified, and so they have like demonstrated over periods of years their regenerative status, and they can have a particular label on their products if they so desire, and we can talk about that later, maybe more in depth, but all of these organizations like Applegate, General Mills, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, all of these love the idea of labels. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And as soon as they learned that we had a network of labels, they came running. And not a single one of those organizations, and this is so strange to me, not a single one of those organizations was willing to work with a diversity of products. And what I mean by that is they want to work with an aggregator, which I guess Commons provisions we are, and you understand that field as well as we do.
We are.
But they didn't want us to source from farms with differing management practices, with different contexts, with different social and ecological contexts, with different breeds of cattle. Like if it wasn't a Black Angus, Paleo Valley isn't buying it, right? So like if you're listening to this and you're eating a Paleo Valley meat stick, like that's a Black Angus cow that came off of a program that followed this regimen. It was 24 months old at month 23, and not 20, 25 and not 23, because God forbid that 25-month-old animal goes into a meat stick, right? Like it's the total separation in my like really it's the bifurcation of life into like production, right? Like you have beef and you have meat sticks, but like God forbid we look at the animal and it says moo and has quality to the thing, right? Anyways, it's that. But it was 24 months old. It was finished on 3 months of annual pastures with high energy and high protein for maximum weight gain. The farms demonstrated 3 pounds of weight gain per day on that animal, which is just crazy to say, right? Like, and it was certified Black Angus, and it was a full frame cow, and it was a steer. So like, God forbid that it had its nuts intact. Like, you better have cut those things off because somehow that matters. Like, they have all of these requirements that eradicate, in my opinion, individual autonomy, right? That farm is not able to produce as their society, their families, their local neighborhoods, and their ecology demand. None of those things. They have to totally step and control and colonize all 4 of those situations. But also, too, the quote-unquote biodiversity that this animal creates because it's climate friendly, right? And all of a sudden that's a term, is entirely singular. It's one breed of cow that for the last 70 to 100 years have been genetically, I don't want to say modified because it's not in a lab, but it's almost in a lab, genetically modified to go in one direction, to produce as much beef in as little time as possible, as best as possible. And now listen, Angus is a fine cow to raise. We have some Angus in a field. But the point is, these systems trying to aggregate these better products, that meat stick in your hand, they are not coming from places that rejoice over and celebrate biodiversity or diversity from a human or ecological perspective. It doesn't exist. This is linearized, mechanistic Ford automobiles being thrown out of a manufacturing plant that happen to moo, right, and not have engines.
Their motive is financial. Their motive is money.
Yes.
Their motive is exploiting a existing marketing tactic and marketing niche. Period. There's nothing else that anyone that works for
no other
otherwise. You know, they'll tell you, well, the owner is a philanthropist that donates to, regenerative farmers across the globe. Great. Okay. Does he go there and see where his money's going when this philanthropist donates to that nonprofit? Because I was in the nonprofit world, and I'll tell you right now, nobody knows where the money goes. They don't know. It's there. They give it. Hopefully the things that they're working on turn out. But, that doesn't give anyone the rhyme or reason to sell a product, claim it for being something that it's not, and go to sleep at night thinking like they're supporting, they're giving more to the world than they're extracting from the world. And I think that's yours and my ideology is how, like, if I question it, or if I doubt it in the least sense, then there's a good possibility that I'm right. That there is something peculiar about what is going on with this particular practice. And to be 100% transparent, and to be a small community-based business like yours and mine, where we're just trying to serve the people within our immediate jurisdiction,
Right.
you have to be 100% right, or at least even in 8 years, I'm still learning. I'm still learning new things. Just from talking with you right now, I learned a few things. Like, how is the common consumer not being how is the common consumer going to stay on top of these things when they have a million other obligations? Isn't it good to know your aggregator, to know your farmer, to know your producer, if that's what you really truly care about? And whether it's for health or to be subversive against these conglomerate giants and our government agencies, whatever the reason is, unless you're going to the farm, unless you are watching these animals be raised, unless you can distinguish what 100% grass-fed is from grass-fed, grass-finished, it doesn't matter. So it's like, if you really want that community-based, resilient, regenerative, hardcore, good quality food system, that's only, and this is like one of the things to circle back to the woman who was ordering from Walden and comes back to us, like, our practices, our farmers are just going to get better. Like, they're just going to get better at it because it was something that was new. 15 years ago wasn't new. It was actually old agricultural practice that we're just bringing back into the market because we got so far away from it with conventional, and they're getting better. They're growing, they're getting cows to slaughter at a faster pace, so the meat is lean and tender. It's delicious. It's flavorful because they're eating 250 varieties of grasses, and as they're learning and they're evolving, they don't just stick to a system. That's what I think the most important part is to make people aware of. Is like, any farmer that's doing things over and over and over and over and over and over, and they're not making change, is manufacturing food. They're not producing, they're not farming, they're manufacturing food. Any way that they can cut costs on their overhead and their infrastructure so that they can produce more and sell it to you at a more affordable cost does not benefit the value of what they're selling or what they claim to be selling.
Absolutely. And that gets all the way down to scale.
Yeah.
Like, we talk about that a lot over here. It's what is the optimal, or is there a ceiling to scale for good food? Because all the farms that the consumer knows as good, the best regenerative farms, they're all massive.
Yeah.
They're all massive farms.
They used to be called ranches.
Ted Turner's is the foremost among them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, 2 million acres, I don't care how many people you have working there. I'm sorry. You have outscaled nature, which is a really impressive thing to do.
Yeah, it really is.
But there's a finite number. I'll say this differently. There's a finite scale that good, clean, holistic, regenerative, nutrient-dense foods that are actually creating a resilient system for the future and for the today. There's a ceiling there. There's a natural ceiling, a limiting force. Because once you get past that threshold, you can only be efficient.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's it.
But below that ceiling, you have every ability to play. Like the small business argument, right? So like, large businesses take years to shift. Small businesses can take seconds to shift because they don't have a lot of things going on, and they can be agile and fluid and creative, and they can dash and they can dodge. Big farms, small farms have the same advantages and disadvantages, right? Yeah. Like, we can change it by grazing management tomorrow. Can these large farms do that?
Yeah.
Like, no, they absolutely can't. And nature is a pivoting force, right? Like, think of one summer that ever was identical to a previous summer. It's never existed. No. One winter that's the exact same as the previous winter, never existed.
Nope.
Management, a regenerative farms management, needs to be adaptive like the season.
All the time. And
you can't do that at scale. No. You just can't do it.
No.
So for the organizations building demand, right, like Paleo Valley's meat sticks or whatever, then going to turn around and try to build a supply chains to meet that demand, they require a mechanistic view of a very efficient farm system. Because anything else is petrifying to them. Like me, I'm on the phone with their purchasing director, and we're chatting. And I was like, well, we aggregate from 40 local farms. They're all verified regenerative. In my opinion, they're the best of the best. They're really doing good work. And man, like you're saying, they're getting better every year. That's the definition of regenerative, right? It's not some utopic state we're going to get to. It's, are we getting better year over year? That's the key. And so they're fulfilling that, and it's amazing. But like, Triple E up in Northern Virginia, West Virginia, he raises retired Jersey heifers or retired Jersey milk cows, and the other guy, he raises Herefords, and some guy raises Whiteface, and this guy raises, Irish Dexters, which are half the size of your, Angus cow, and we can give all of them to you. Like this whole diverse medley coming from this whole diverse medley of farms, right? Growing in different growing seasons and social, pressures or social communities. Like that's what we should be celebrating.
Yeah.
And organizations like Paleo Valley, they lose their brains. Like, no. It has to be certified Black Angus. It has to, be grown in this way.
Why do you think they stick to those standards? Just from what you know about farming.
I think they stick to those standards because the pace of nature petrifies them.
Yeah.
I think the pace of nature, which undulates, it picks up, it slows down. There's natural disasters, cows die, whatever. I mean, like that. The beauty of nature, I see that as the beauty of nature. The beauty of nature, it
life and death,
right?
that. I don't fear death. Like
Absolutely.
Death is a beautiful thing. People have been dying. Everything's been dying forever. So it's like, why do we run around terrified of it? Let's live our life optimally and not worry about those things, because those things that we're worrying about is why we're making these quick, fast decisions now, instead of like taking the time to really digest them and understand them.
Yeah, I think the large industrial model of food aggregation is the fear of death.
Fear of death.
We're the fear of the uncertainty,
Yeah.
which might mean that uncertainty breeding death in an organization or a supply chain or a product line. Like Paleo Valley, they thrive in the sense that, every single month they bring in this number of cows, and every single month those particular number of cows create this number of meat sticks, and this number of meat sticks builds this amount of revenue and profit, and they can bring that to their board or bring that to their investor pool or bring that to their monthly P&L meeting. And it's like, listen, we're running a Ford manufacturing facility. Look at us. Yeah. Right. But it's not regenerative food. It's not natural food. No. It's not holistic food. It's surely not creating a resilient world. No.
It's not regenerative in the least, especially when you see what farmers have to do to establish a regenerative farm. Like, you have to put years into these operations on small acreage. So when you start talking big acreage, what's really happening there? Like cows could be grazing there all the time. Like what's the capacity of cows grazing there? What type of cows are grazing there? How frequently are they grazing particular parts of that pasture? Are they being moved enough? Are they, what grasses are they feeding on? Where, how much sunshine are they getting? How much water are they drinking? Where's the water coming from? It's like a million questions that farmers have to worry about every day. And the only time that they can do that is by being at a small scale operation, something where they are intimate with their animals and what they're creating, not just owning land, throwing animals out into the field, letting them live their, their lives, and then dishing them off to all these small producers for whatever size or quantity they need to produce the product that they need from that animal. And it's, it's obvious, like, why these systems are so broken. And it's, someone trying to do better. I see it a lot now on social media. Like these big ranchers are like, believe it or not, that meat that's at Whole Foods is actually grass fed because I raised it. It's like, you raised it, possibly on grass on your fields for its first 14 months. That shit was not finished on grass its last, 6 to 8 months if it was actually grass fed and finished.
Right.
So, right. And the fact that they're stating that is it's upsetting because they're not even selling direct to consumer. They're selling to producers. They're selling to other possible farmers. Like I work with a farmer that raises livestock, and he raises them from young to a certain age and then passes it on and says, this is what they've been feeding the whole time. You can finish them off. But these are small farms. Nothing is bigger than 1,200 acres. You know, there are a few in PA that are 3,000, but even 3,000 is like a manageable, something that could be managed on a scale where you can claim like I am regenerative. You can't be, 40,000 acres and say that I'm regenerative, because you're going to be grazing cows there all the time.
Right.
With no other.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I agree with you completely. Like larger 1, 2, 3,000 acre farms, not regenerative, not degenerative implicitly. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But my God, I'll tell you what, a 200 acre regenerative farm, much smaller. I mean, it's a special place.
Yeah, it is.
It's truly a special place. Like, go for a tour on a smaller, what I would call human scale. Like, if you can tour the farm on your feet, take a nice 2 or 3 hour walk through the farm on your feet, human scale tour. God, your life's going to change.
Yeah.
That farmer is going to say, right there in that little square foot of that little pasture, one time a calf was born. Like the marriage between humanity and the land, and humanity, the land, and its animals, it's singular. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Right? And there's no way Whole Foods, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, Force of Nature, all of these other organizations, there's no way for them to accomplish that, to truly celebrate that. Yes. Could any one of these organizations switch their supply chains and stop buying from 2 million acres in Montana, ranches in Montana or New Zealand or whatever? Like, I was on the phone with one of these companies recently, and they're importing 100,000 pounds of ground beef from New Zealand a month. Just say that again.
Yeah.
You as the consumer are going to Whole Foods, and I guarantee you are buying a brand that says regenerative on the label, that is bringing in 100,000 pounds of ground beef from New Zealand a month. 1, that's in cargo ships, you fools.
Yeah.
2, you have no traceability. Never. You will never understand the true nature of that meat.
No.
3, you will never understand if that meat coming in is actually grass-fed, because you have no ability to take the meat out of the cargo ships, bring it through this massive organization, and have complete traceability. It's not possible.
Not possible.
Not only that, but if those 3 reasons for degeneration don't convince you, you have local farmers a stone's throw away from you, or maybe in New York, maybe it's 5 stones away from you, whatever the case, but really close, right? A 30-mile drivable distance at the most, that are raising a better product at better prices. If you actually worked with those in that community, better prices, raised with traceable, knowledgeable results, and you know that when you purchase from that farmer, you're helping your ecoregion. You're helping your community. You're helping build your local food shed. You're not helping some cargo ship company. This is ridiculous. We're not allowed to put regeneration on that label.
No.
Right? Regeneration can't include a cargo ship. And with all due respect, I don't think regeneration...
where that beef fed, you're not there's no regeneration happening. The people are just as are involved in that regeneration process.
And even if you could do that, which you can't, and you're totally right, but even if you could say that beef is unbelievable beef coming from New Zealand, it's unbelievably grass-fed, it's great, there's still an 8,000 or 7,000 mile journey, right, for that beef to undergo. Not just that, but carbon and fuel and fossil fuels and oil and systems and metal and precious metals that need to be continually nurtured and extracted right from the earth, and then nurtured in these industrial models just to allow that to happen is asinine. And then, if that wasn't enough, and then you have this thing called science that says when you let your local ecosystem nourish local bodies, the local not only becomes more enhanced and resilient, but health, like magic, increases. Right? Like, your local environment can produce the best food possible for you because you're all dealing with the same problems. Right? Like, there's a percentage of glyphosate or toxins in the air here in Central Virginia. The trees around me and the forages around me and the bugs and the birds and the deer and the bear and the coyotes and the mountain lions and the cows and the sheep and the goats and the pigs and the chickens and the ducks, we're all fighting the same thing. So let's fight it together. Right? Why take beef that's adapted to a New Zealand climate, and I mean that from the fullness of that perspective, and pump that into Central Virginian bodies. It makes no sense,
But,
especially not when we have beef right there.
well, that's because, we have
You
the
know?
whole center of the country that's just commodity growing, conventional beef and conventional. Oh, we have plenty of land here to feed the people here. And a lot of people will tell you otherwise. Well, how are we going to feed the world? No one needs to feed the world. Let's feed our communities. I don't need New Zealand to feed my family. Like, when I see how many farms, we work with 50 farms. 85% of them are in our county of New Jersey.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, just our county. I think there's 300,000 acres of preserved farmland in our county alone. Unfortunately, most of them are like boarding horses or llamas for, any land that could be easily turned into a food producing, farm. But yeah, we're getting there. And like, you said 7,000 miles on New Zealand beef. I'm like, that's just like the actual meat that you're eating, let alone what was the animal going through before it found its way to the slaughterhouse,
Yeah.
I mean, and then on top of that, your grass-fed beef American standards thing that you mentioned, like there's between those standards, between what they can call what the U.S. government can call grass-fed beef, and then what New Zealand is selling you as grass-fed regenerative beef, there is no way that a consumer can sit there and say, this is 100% grass-fed beef. Absolutely no way.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I wrote a book 2 years ago and I was researching for it, and I didn't know this. I'll be honest. I've been around the agriculture space for a long time, and this was news to me, which only illustrates your point even more. I learned from a United States Department of Agriculture paper back in 2017. The paper was dated 47% of all corn produced in the United States either goes towards tractors or cattle. And when I say tractors, I don't mean lawnmowers, to be very clear. Although that's as problematic as what I am talking about still. Yeah. It's going to diesel engines that is going to plant and harvest more corn, soy, wheat, and other things. 47% of the corn we produce, which is, to my understanding, as of 2017, when I got this statistic, the highest. I mean, it's what the United States is producing more of than anything else. Wheat is close. And maybe wheat has surpassed it, but if it only has, it's the second largest, commodity that's being produced in the United States. Yeah. Almost half of that commodity goes towards beef.
Yeah.
Realize that.
Yeah.
Realize that. And especially if American Grass-Fed Association, I can feed cornmeal and corn cobs. I just have to offload the corn kernels first, and that can still be labeled as grass-fed and finished. The system is laughable.
Yeah, it's laughable.
Right? Like people say all the times, we grow the corn so that we can feed the tractors, so that we can move the corn into cows, so that we can plant more corn to do it all over again.
Yeah.
Right? It's a system that is going to self-combust the second it stops, and that's why it keeps going.
Yeah. Yep. And whereas regenerative farmers are trying to produce the most food or yield the most food per acre of land. So think of that scale, and then think of the scale you just mentioned. They are polar opposites. So it's polar opposites.
And that's like, when we decided to do these phone calls, this is the moment of hope, in my opinion. At least it's the moment of hope for, I think, you and I. I hope this is a happy part for everybody else. But what that is saying is we have two options. We have three options total. We have industrial agriculture verbatim. Okay. Yep. We have industrial agriculture that wants to be regenerative, and it's selling to you those products to you as regenerative. Or we have regenerative. Right? Yeah. But like the farms that you are working with, the farms we are working with, the farms in the local communities of local consumers, that's regenerative. Now, not all of those farms are regenerative, but there's regenerative farms there.
Yeah, and there's
farms that are healing their...
Yeah, they're healing their soil.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're working to heal the soil. They're working to increase biodiversity. They're working to heal the water cycle and the decomposition and the mineral cycle. They're building stable soil, organic matter.
More carbon versus emitting more carbon.
Exactly. They're working through that. Yeah. Those people exist. They're there.
They're there. But they're
right?
small.
But if you go to Whole Foods to buy your meat, or you go online to buy your meat and it's not boneinfood.com, right, or eatcommons.com, and I would be so willing to meet a third person for this little trio here. Like, I don't even know if they exist. The point is, any other alternative from either supporting organizations that are just existing to support local farms like Bone In and Commons, or buying from the farms directly, no other alternative is regenerative.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. No. It literally doesn't exist.
No. So, we have those three alternatives, and we should probably end it there, because this is just one topic. But they have, if you have your regenerative farmers supporting your small farms, that's one option. Then you have the other option, which is like, all right, I'm just going to support conventional commodity industrial agriculture. That middle ground is broad. It could be farmers who want to work towards regenerative agriculture and might tell a white lie and might get over hurdles, or they might be completely 100% transparent and have an idea and mission in place. But you won't know that until you talk to the people who are handling the food, who are handling the cattle, who are handling the production of that, item they're offering to their community. So it's like that. At the end of the day, we know that you either know where you're getting your meat from, or you're supporting the beast. So, if that middle ground is so broad, that's where our conundrum lies right now, because it's a marketing niche. That middle ground is, it could be large farmers that are trying to practice regenerative agriculture, but it could also be large farmers practicing agriculture that are overtaking, the market in certain regions, because now we're going back to scale. Like, should they be overtaking those markets in their region, or should they be maybe consulting and sharing with other farmers how to better their practice and not dominating a market? Like, are we getting back to bad capitalism? This isn't a competitive field. Regenerative farmers aren't, they're competing for, who could sell the most CSAs, but they're competing to see who can sell more of what they offer, so that they can move the needle forward on this movement. Not, I want to take all your CSA members, or I want to sell beef to your buyers versus you selling beef to, I want to take all your buyers and bring them to me. Once you get to that point, then you're thinking in terms of scale that are just, beyond the idea of regenerative, because human consumption is part of a regenerative practice. So
yes, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And the thing that petrifies me is, like you're saying, that middle ground is just marketing.
Yeah, that's all it is.
And that petrifies.
Yeah, it is.
Like that is scary. Which, what it says is, whoever has the most money to spend on as much marketing is going to win.
Butcher box.
Which, yeah, oh my God, right?
Come on.
Like
the guy, all he did, he spends more money, he spends more time and money raising money than he does actually giving a shit about what's happening with his operation. And I can say that.
And you see that with his products. Yeah. And you see that with his products.
Oh, bacon for free for life if you sign up now. Who's giving bacon away for free? Like, there is not one farmer that feels comfortable giving away a pound of bacon, let alone bacon for the life of your subscription.
Right, and maybe this is a bigger conversation for another time, but I'll bring it up now, I guess. Just, I don't know, it's on topic. And the same thing goes for, like, organizations that are selling meat online and shipping it to your door for free. Like, oh my God, this just drives me nuts. FedEx will not back up a semi-truck to your internet fulfillment center, okay, for less than a semi-truck load.
Yeah, right.
Okay. That semi-truck load, once you get to that volume, now it depends on the size of the semi-truck. There's a couple variables I'm missing, but basically what the narrative I'm saying is pretty true. Universally true across all of that complexity. It's not until you reach a semi-truck load that you get a discount for the actual price per box that you ship. Yeah. So you have to ship, let's say, 100 boxes, 200 boxes, whatever it is, at a single time in order to get that pricing discount. And by the way, that pricing discount for a 12 by 12 by 12 box, which fits maybe 15 pounds of meat in, very little amounts of meat fits in that side of a box, $60. You can fill a whole semi-truck load of 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot cube boxes with 15 pounds of meat in each, and you're still paying $60 to ship it. And so my point is $15 of meat. Let's just run the quick math. $15 of meat, let's say at an average price of $10 a pound, is $150. But I'm eating as a company $60 to ship that meat to you. So I'm really selling $90, right? I'm only making $90. So my point is, how much money do the farms not get paid so that the companies that are buying their meat to ship it for free to your lazy ass doorstep, right? You how much money is this? How profitable do these companies have to be to give away literally almost a third of the revenue to shipping, right? Just to get it to your door as a convenient 2-day delivery in a nice box with a bunch of nice logos. Like, this is ridiculous. What that means is the farmers, the farmers are not making that.
That's
whatever it is.
It comes down to who's actually taking that hit. Is it the company that ships?
It's not the business,
or is it the
farmers? It's the farmers.
So
it's the farmers. I mean, we did a survey, and we did a survey, or just basically a large data gathering. The average price that all of these organizations we're talking about pays for their food is about $2 to $3 a pound. Yet they retail that to you for $10 to $11 a pound. Like, that's how much overhead they have. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
When you buy that we're running operations, like, our whole model is keeping our overhead as low as possible so that we can be competitive with our sales. So who's helping us out? The farmers are giving us a location to work from for free because they know that our margins are small. That's like every farmer that we work with says your margins have to be small to meet the demand because you're only taking a fraction of our cost at retail. We're only taking a fraction of the cost at retail off. And I'm like, and that's the way it should be. I'm the aggregator. You guys are doing the real work. I'm just the aggregator. I'm just helping. We make money, and our success is based off volume. So, yes, we need to educate the public. We need people to be more behind this. But even then, at some point, we're going to reach a pinnacle. So hopefully there's other businesses like yours that can come in and pick up the pieces, and eventually all those small networks combine, and the small farmers that are practicing regenerative have outlets, they have distribution, they have marketing, all being done for them. They just are doing the work that we wish everybody else was doing.
Yeah, they're just doing the good work.
They're just doing the good work.
I couldn't agree with you more. We have to create systems where farmers farm. They make money farming. They stay on the farm. They thrive on the farm. Because at the end of the day, ask any one of your farmers, what is the most important aspect to your farm? It's attention. It's my feet need to be here. I need to see this plant growing before it, you get it.
I've even talked to some farmers. I've even talked to some farmers because I feel bad because most of them who have livestock work 365 days a year, and some of them can't leave the animals. Like, they can't go on vacation. So we thought about, like, why don't we start a nonprofit, like, farmer fill-in? And we just...
I'm in. If you want to come watch my farm for a day,
that'd be great.
Like a week. I'll go on vacation.
Go on vacation for a week. Get someone there who knows what the hell they're doing. Like, I think charity money and donation money towards something like that would be more beneficial than charitable and donation money going towards, like, school programs and all these other things to try to inspire people to want to eat healthy. You know what I mean? Because
I couldn't agree more.
It's like those organizations, like, that should be paid for by the state no matter what. You know what I mean? If the fact that you're still allowing, we were at a NOFA conference recently. I think we had talked to post that, I think. But the USDA requires you to pay a certain amount annually and to fill out all this paperwork, and then you have to follow this protocol to be certified organic. But a conventional farmer who's spraying the shit out of his field, destroying the soil ecosystem, destroying the health of that environment, serving toxic foods to people, just has to show per yield acre, has to prove per yield acre to the USDA. So that's criminal in my mind. Like, if you know something's happening that is not good for humans and not good for the environment and not good for our long-term sustainability, but yet the people who are trying to adhere to these things are demanded of all these extra alternatives that some of them can't afford, then there's a break there. Somewhere in there, some criminal activity is happening.
Yeah, for sure. And the same thing extends to everything else we've talked about.
It's all related.
You can't be You can't be selling meat at twice the value of Walmart meat when it's actually twice as bad as that's criminal in my opinion. You can't be selling people meat that is medicine and it's actually the opposite.
Yep.
Like, stop. You can't be doing that. You can't be selling meat that's good for the planet that's bad for biodiversity. That doesn't exist. That phrase cannot be uttered.
Feeding food to our children without any transparency of where that food's coming from?
Yeah.
Oh, because it's from a manufacturing facility? Because some people with hazmat suits were handling your food, it's okay to eat in a stainless steel facility? Yeah. Like, that's the protocol?
Exactly right.
That's the protocol?
Exactly right.
We are natural. We are human. We are like natural beings at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Wait. You don't think that we've always had sterilized plastic and stainless? I thought that's always been around.
Yeah, I thought so too. Right? How long have people been here? 100 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's since the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, that was it.
I think that's
125.
Yeah, 100 years.
Because I'm getting older.
Well, thanks, Ron. We can cut this.
Yeah, this is awesome.
I'm appreciative. I'm gonna stay around, but